Welcome to Creepy Crime Cases. Today, we will be covering one of the most heartbreaking cases that have come out of Tennessee. I want to personally welcome you to today's episode. Thank you for your time. The simple act of going for a run is something millions of people do every day for health, peace, for clarity. But for 34-year-old Eliza Fletcher, also known as Liza, it was a passion that defined her. She was a teacher, a mother of two, and a dedicated marathoner. Her life was one of structure, discipline, and love. But in the early hours of a random September morning, a violent encounter, captured on a grainy surveillance camera, would transform a story of life into a mystery of death. The city of Memphis was deep in the quiet stillness that comes just before dawn on Friday, September 2, 2022. For most people, the day had not yet begun. Streets were empty, houses were dark, and the world felt paused. But for Eliza Fletcher, this was a time of purpose. She was a woman who lived her life with intention and incredible energy. Running wasn't just a casual hobby. It was a fundamental part of her identity. It was how she challenged herself, how she found peace, and how she prepared for the goals she set. She wasn't just running, she was training, and she was really good at it. Just months before, she had accomplished a dream for any serious runner. She had qualified for the Boston Marathon. Her time at the St. Jude Marathon in Memphis was an amazing 3 hours, 26 minutes, and 9 seconds. That's a pace most of us can't even imagine keeping for a single mile, let alone a whooping 26.2 miles. But running was only one part of who she was. If you asked the people who knew her best, they would first tell you about her role as a mother. She had 2 young sons who were the absolute center of her world. She was married to Richard Fletcher, also called Richie by friends and family. They were a team, deeply in love and deeply committed to their family and their faith. They were active members of the Second Presbyterian Church in Memphis, a place where they found community and strength. She had a vibrancy that people noticed. She was also a dedicated kindergarten teacher at St. Mary's Episcopal School. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. The school itself posted a tribute to her, saying, "She knows each student individually and does whatever she can to excite them for learning." You will always find her celebrating big and small successes in the classroom. She saw each child as their own person and found joy in their achievements. That takes a special kind of heart. Liza was the granddaughter of Joseph "Joe" Orgel III, a hugely successful Memphis businessman and philanthropist. The company he ran, Orgel, is a massive hardware distribution company worth billions of dollars. She could have chosen a life of ease, maybe working in the family business. But that wasn't her path. Instead, she got her degree in exercise and sports science, then a master's in teaching. She chose a path of service, working with children, and also getting up at 4 a.m. to push her body to its limits. This combination of qualities, the elite athlete, the nurturing teacher, the devoted mother, and the humble heiress, is what made her so special to her community. So on that September morning, when her alarm went off, it was just the same as countless mornings before. This was her time, her routine. She put on her pink top and her purple Lululemon running shorts, and she stepped out into the warm, late summer air. Her plan was a familiar route near the University of Memphis campus, a path she knew well. Everything was normal. She had no way of knowing that this routine she loved that defined her was about to be violently taken from her. The darkness that morning held more than just the absence of sun. It held a danger she could never have anticipated, a danger that was already waiting for her. At 4:16 a.m., a black 2013 GMC Terrain SUV was captured on a surveillance camera driving slowly through the area near the University of Memphis. It moved with a certain deliberateness, not like someone was lost, but like someone who was looking. The driver was circling. 24 minutes later, at exactly 4:20 a.m., the same vehicle passed Eliza Fletcher as she ran near the intersection of Central Avenue and Zach H. Curland Street. What happened next was recorded by a security camera, providing a chilling, grainy, and silent witness to the horror that unfolded. The passenger door opened, and a man got out. There was no time for her to react in any meaningful way. He was on her instantly. A violent struggle erupted right there on the sidewalk. It was a desperate battle under the dim light of the street lamps. He was trying to overpower her, to force her into the vehicle. Despite her strength and her will, he eventually succeeded in forcing her into the passenger side of the SUV. Then, something strange and ominous happened. The vehicle didn't speed away. It sat there for about 4 minutes. No one knows what might have happened inside that car during those 4 minutes. But finally, at 4:27 a.m., the SUV's brake lights disengaged, and it drove away, turning onto Zach Curland Street. It disappeared into the darkness, taking Eliza Fletcher with it. The sidewalk was empty again. But it wasn't the same. The scene was now a crime scene. Left behind on the pavement was the evidence of the struggle. Her cell phone was there. A water bottle was there. These were personal items, suddenly abandoned. But there was something else left behind, something that didn't belong to her. A pair of men's sandals, specifically Champion slide sandals, were lying on the ground. In his violent effort to grab her, and in her fierce struggle to get away, the attacker had lost his own footwear. This was a piece of evidence that would ultimately help identify him. The entire event, from the moment the man got out of the car to the moment it drove away, lasted about 7 minutes. The grainy footage, once reviewed by police, became the key to everything. It was the last time anyone would see Eliza Fletcher alive. When Eliza Fletcher did not return home from her run, her family knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. This was so far outside her normal routine, so completely against her character as a responsible and dedicated mother, that panic quickly set in. They reported her missing to the Memphis Police Department. The clock was now ticking faster than anyone could imagine. Police officers responded and began their investigation at the scene near the university. It was there they found her discarded cell phone and water bottle. And it was there they found the single pair of men's Champion slide sandals. This was no longer a missing person case. The evidence pointed clearly to a struggle and an abduction. The first major break came when investigators were able to obtain the surveillance footage. Watching the tape, they saw the entire horrific event play out. They now had a visual of the suspect, a clear view of the vehicle, a black GMC Terrain with a distinct broken or damaged taillight, and a timeline of the crime. The decision was made to go public with this information quickly to enlist the public's help. The police released images of the SUV and the crucial piece of the broken taillight to the media. They asked anyone who had seen this vehicle to come forward. Meanwhile, the Fletcher family, reeling from shock and fear, made a brave and public plea. Eliza's uncle, Mike Keeney, stood at a podium at a press conference. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. Behind him, Eliza's husband, Richard "Richie" Fletcher, stood, his face pale and etched with an anguish that was heartbreaking to see. He wiped tears from his eyes as his uncle-in-law spoke. "We believe someone knows what happened and can help," Mike Keeney told the cameras. "More than anything, we want to see Liza returned home safely." The family offered a $50,000 reward for her safe return. It was a desperate attempt to appeal to anyone who might have information, to motivate someone to talk. The investigation was massive and multi-layered. The FBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, and the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, all joined the Memphis PD to assist. This was now a major operation. Search teams were organized to comb through the area. They searched dumpsters, ponds, and parks. They were looking for any clue, any piece of evidence, any sign of Eliza. The sandals left at the scene were sent for urgent DNA analysis. While that processing was underway, another key piece of the puzzle fell into place. U.S. Marshals, following up on tips from the public about the SUV, located a vehicle that matched the description perfectly. It was parked in a parking lot near the home of a man named Eliza Fletcher. Not only was it the same make and model, but it also had the same exact damaged taillight visible in the surveillance footage. They knew immediately that it was the car. On September 3rd, just over 24 hours after Eliza was taken, officers found Eliza Fletcher near that location. When they approached him, he did something that immediately made him look guilty. He tried to run. He was quickly apprehended and taken into custody. This was a huge moment. They had a suspect. Now they needed to build the case against him and, more importantly, they needed him to tell them where Eliza was. Witnesses were interviewed. One witness, and shockingly, Fletcher's own brother, gave statements to the police. They said they had seen Eliza Fletcher on the morning of September 2nd acting very strange. They said he was vigorously cleaning the inside of the GMC Terrain. He was using bleach or some other cleaner to scrub the interior. He was also seen washing his clothes in the sink of his apartment, as if trying desperately to get rid of evidence. This testimony was devastating. It showed a clear consciousness of guilt. He knew he had committed a crime, and he was trying to cover it up. The police now had the suspect, the vehicle, and witnesses to his suspicious behavior after the fact. The entire city was waiting, hoping that this arrest would lead them to Eliza. The search for Eliza Fletcher consumed Memphis for 3 days. The community was on edge, hoping for a miracle but fearing the worst. Search teams, consisting of police officers, FBI agents, and volunteers, combed through areas based on the evidence they had and the locations connected to Eliza Fletcher. Their focus intensified on a part of South Memphis. It was an area that wasn't far from where Fletcher had been arrested. Specifically, they were looking near a vacant duplex on Victor Street, close to an abandoned elementary school. The area was overgrown with tall grass and littered with the remnants of neglect. It was a place that felt forgotten, which made it a likely spot for someone to hide something they didn't want found. On Monday, September 5th, just after 5 p.m., the search reached its tragic conclusion. A search and rescue officer was methodically working through the tall grass behind the vacant duplex. The air was heavy and quiet, broken only by the sounds of insects and the distant noise of the city. Then, the officer noticed something, a smell. It was the distinct, the sickly dense odor of decay. It's a smell that once you recognize it, you never forget. And there, in the tall grass near the rear driveway of the property, he saw her. An unresponsive female, lying on the ground. It was clear she was deceased. He immediately called it in. The scene was secured. The area, which had been buzzing with the activity of a search, suddenly became still and somber, transformed into a hallowed and tragic crime scene. Investigators descended on the scene, documenting everything with a careful, clinical precision. They had to preserve the evidence. They had to understand what had happened here. Near her body, they found a trash bag. Inside it were her purple Lululemon running shorts, the same one she was wearing in the surveillance footage from her run. They also found a single shell casing lying on the ground. This was critical evidence pointing to how she was killed. Later that evening, the Memphis Police Department made the official announcement that no one wanted to hear. They had found the remains of Eliza Fletcher. The news spread quickly, sending a wave of grief and anger through the city and across the nation. The discovery site was less than a mile from where a witness had seen Cleatha Abston cleaning his SUV. It was a short drive, a place he likely knew well. The fact that her body was found so close to his own area underscored the brutal randomness of the crime. She was taken from one part of the city and left in another. The confirmation of her death meant that the charges against Cleatha Abston were about to become much more severe. The focus of the investigation now shifted from a rescue mission to a homicide investigation. The goal was no longer to bring her home alive, but to secure justice for her murder. The recovery of her body brought a painful kind of closure to her family, the agony of knowing she was gone, but an end to the torturous uncertainty of not knowing where she was. With Cleatha Abston in custody and charged with murder, the public and the media began to ask a single burning question. Who was this man? The answer, once his history was unearthed, was terrifying and revealed a decades-long pattern of violence that made Eliza Fletcher's murder feel tragically predictable. To understand Cleatha Abston is to understand a life almost entirely spent within the criminal justice system, a path that began in childhood and should have never led him to a free street where he could encounter the ever-bright and smiling glow of Eliza Fletcher that morning. His criminal record didn't start in his 20s. It started when he was just 11 years old. He was a product of a broken system from the very beginning, cycling through juvenile facilities and known to be part of a local gang called the Lemoyne Garden Gangstas. By the time he was 16 years old, he had already been arrested an astonishing 16 times. His charges as a juvenile included serious offenses like theft, aggravated assault, unlawful possession of a weapon, and even the alleged rape of a man when he was only 14. But one crime from his past stood out for its chilling similarity to the abduction of Eliza Fletcher. It was a blueprint, a warning that was tragically unheeded. On May 24, 2000, at around 2 a.m., a prominent Memphis attorney named Kemper Durand was walking to his car in the early morning darkness, on a relatively quiet street when Abston, then just 16 years old, approached him. He was armed with a gun. He forced Durand into the trunk of his own car. He then drove the attorney around for hours, a terrifying ordeal where Durand must have been certain he was going to die. Eventually, Abston drove to an ATM machine. He forced Durand to withdraw money, essentially robbing him. It was at this moment that Durand saw his chance. As they were at the ATM, he shouted for help to a passerby. This brave act startled Abston, who panicked and fled the scene, allowing Durand to escape with his life. For this crime, Cleatha Abston was charged as an adult. In 2001, he pleaded guilty to the especially aggravated kidnapping of Kemper Durand. The judge sentenced him to 24 years in prison. This was a significant sentence, one that reflected the severity of his actions. He was sent away, and for a time, the streets of Memphis were safer without him. However, the prison system did not reform him. Records from his time inside show a continued pattern of disturbing behavior. He was written up for 19 separate instances of indecent exposure. In one report, a prison guard commented that the inmate simply couldn't help himself. This showed a complete lack of restraint and respect for boundaries, even in a controlled environment. Despite this, after serving 19 years of his 24-year sentence, Cleatha Abston was released from prison in November 2020. The decision was made, and he was set free. At a parole hearing years before, his victim, Kemper Durand, had pleaded with the board not to release him, stating he believed Abston had shown absolutely no remorse for the crime. His warning was prophetic, but it went unheeded. He was given a second chance that he would violently squander, and a little over a year and a half after his release, his path would fatally cross with Eliza Fletcher's. His past was not just a history, it was a direct warning of his future potential for violence, a warning that the system failed to act upon effectively. The story of Cleatha Abston's past crime was a dark omen, but an even more immediate and devastating failure of the system occurred just 1 year before Eliza Fletcher's murder. This failure involved another woman, a woman whose nightmare could have been the key to preventing the tragedy that followed. Her name is Eliza Franklin. In September of 2021, Franklin met Cleotha Abston on a dating app. They made plans to meet in person. This is a normal part of modern life, but for Eliza, it turned into a horrific trap. She reported to police that when she met Abston, he pulled a gun on her. He blindfolded her, threatened to kill her, and then forced her to walk to his car. He pushed her into the back seat and then raped her. It was a brutal, premeditated assault. Eliza Franklin, showing immense courage, reported the attack to the Memphis Police Department. She went through the incredibly invasive and traumatic process of a rape kit examination. This kit contained DNA evidence that could directly identify her attacker. This is where the system broke down catastrophically. The rape kit was collected, but it was not processed in a timely manner. Eliza Franklin's case grew cold. Meanwhile, Cleotha Abston continued his life, facing no consequences for the alleged rape. The DNA evidence that could have directly linked him to this violent crime was just sitting there, and used while the clock kept ticking. A swift analysis could have immediately identified Abston, as his DNA was already in the system from his prior conviction. He could have been arrested and charged with aggravated rape, a charge that would almost certainly have put him back behind bars without bond. And perhaps Eliza would not have encountered such horror at his hands. The tragic irony is almost too much to bear. The rape kit from Eliza Franklin's assault was finally processed. The results came back on September 5, 2022. The DNA was a match to Cleotha Abston. This definitive proof arrived on the exact same day that search teams discovered Eliza Fletcher's body. While one part of the system was finding a victim, another part was finally confirming the identity of her killer in a previous case. It was a devastating convergence of failures. Following his arrest for Fletcher's murder, Abston was formally charged with the rape of Eliza Franklin. For Eliza, it was a long overdue moment of validation, but it was overshadowed by the devastating knowledge that her attacker had allegedly killed someone else while his DNA sat waiting to be analyzed. Since the discovery of Eliza Fletcher's body moved the case from a kidnapping investigation to a homicide case. The legal process now required an official, scientific determination of the cause of her death. This came in the form of an autopsy report conducted by the West Tennessee Regional Forensic Center. The report was clinical and precise, but its contents were horrifying to read, detailing the specific and brutal injuries that ended Eliza's life. It provided the final, terrible facts of what she endured. The primary cause of death was a gunshot wound to the back of her head. The report stated that the shot was fired from an indeterminate range, meaning it was impossible to tell from exactly how far away the gun was fired. This single injury would have been instantly fatal. But the autopsy revealed more. It told a story of a fight. It showed that Eliza Fletcher did not go quietly. She had suffered blunt force injuries to her right leg. These were not minor bruises. They were significant injuries consistent with a severe struggle, perhaps from being kicked or struck with a hard object. She also had fractures to her jaw. This particular injury paints a vivid and awful picture of the violence she faced. It suggests she was likely punched or pistol-whipped in the face during the struggle. These findings confirmed what the surveillance footage had already hinted at, that Eliza, a strong and determined athlete, had fought back against her attacker with everything she had. Her body bore the evidence of her courage and her desperate will to survive. The official findings provided the necessary evidence for prosecutors to formally upgrade the charges against Cleotha Abston. Initially, after his arrest, he had been charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and tampering with evidence. After her body was found, those charges were swiftly expanded. He was now charged with first-degree murder and first-degree murder in the perpetration of a kidnapping. In a court appearance shortly after the murder charges were filed, Abston made a strange request. He asked the judge to refer to him by Cleatha Henderson instead of Cleatha Abston. The jail records were updated to reflect this. It was an odd, seemingly insignificant act in the face of such monstrous charges. He was held without bond, ensuring he would remain in custody until his trial. The clinical details of the autopsy report served as the final, scientific chapter in the story of the crime itself, providing the proof needed to ensure the charges would stick and that he would never walk free again. In the days following the discovery of Eliza Fletcher's body, a deep sadness settled over Memphis. But from that profound grief, something powerful began to grow. The community refused to let her death be just another headline. They refused to be defined by fear. Instead, they chose to celebrate her life and honor her spirit in a way that was both beautiful and powerful. They decided to organize a memorial event called Finish Liza's Run. The concept was simple. Thousands of people would gather and complete the run that she could not finish. They would run her route, not in sadness, but in solidarity and strength. It was scheduled for Friday, September 9th, just 1 week after her abduction. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people signed up to participate. On the morning of the event, a massive crowd gathered. There were elite runners, casual joggers, families walking with strollers, and people who had never run a mile in their lives. They all came together. They wore purple and pink, the colors of her running outfit. As they ran together through the streets of Memphis, it was not a somber funeral procession. It was a moving tribute. The sound of thousands of feet hitting the pavement was a sound of defiance. It was a community saying, "We are not afraid. We will remember Liza." The event was covered by news outlets across the country, becoming a symbol of how a community can respond to darkness with its own form of light. It showed that Eliza's legacy would not be one of victimhood, but one of inspiration. It lives on in her 2 young sons, who will grow up hearing stories about their mother's strength and kindness. It lives on in her husband, Richie, and the entire Fletcher and Orgel families. It lives on in the students she taught at St. Mary's Episcopal School, whose lives she touched in her classroom. But perhaps most publicly, her legacy is one of awareness. Her murder sparked a national conversation about the safety of women, particularly women who loved to run alone. It sparked discussions about justice reform, about the parole system, and about the critical importance of processing rape kits promptly. While nothing can ever bring Eliza Fletcher back, the way her community rallied ensured that her story would have a lasting impact far beyond the crime itself. She is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived, as a vibrant, loving, accomplished, and fiercely determined woman whose light was extinguished far too soon. The run that she started alone in the dark was finished by thousands in the light, a perfect metaphor for a community carrying her memory forward. The story of Eliza Fletcher is one that leaves us with a heavy heart and difficult questions. It's a stark reminder of how fragile life can be and how tragedy can strike in the most ordinary moments. Her case forces us to look at uncomfortable truths about our justice system, the parole process, and the dire consequences of bureaucratic delays. It's a story that underscores the importance of vigilance, both personally and systemically. This story, like so many others, is why this channel exists. To remember the victims, to examine the facts, and to encourage a dialogue about how we can all work toward a safer and more just world. And you can be a part of that mission. If you found this deep dive impactful, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. It's the single best way to support this work and ensure you don't miss our next investigation. Every subscriber helps this channel grow and helps us continue covering these important stories. I encourage you to share your reflections in the comments below. What part of this story resonated most with you? How do you think communities can better support victims and prevent such tragedies? Please remember to be respectful to the victim, her family, and other commenters. If you believe this story is important, please share this video. By sharing, you help amplify Eliza's legacy and ensure that these conversations continue beyond this video. Your engagement turns a single video into a community of people who care about truth and justice. Thank you for watching. Stay aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.